Hey, good evening. Welcome to Marriage Mondays. We're happy to be here tonight to share another topic that should help your marriage and your relationships. We just want to thank you for coming in tonight with us and sharing this moment in time that we can help you with your marriages and in your relationships.
So we encourage you to share this video, start a watch party, or whatever you got to do. Tag your friends, send them a quick message so that we can get them tuned in. We can get some people signed in. We got Tia, first one on today. Miss Tia, Miss Francine. We appreciate you guys joining us. So we're going to give time for a few more people to jump on in here before we get started. So while we're waiting, we will just go ahead and remind everybody that the church ministry, Crown Kingdom Cultural Center, we are having Bible study this week every day at 12 noon. Bishop did say that tomorrow's airing will be later in the day, so we just kind of have to watch out for that notice. If you are connected to the church Facebook page group, you certainly will get a what's it called? Like a notification, yeah, of when it goes live, or same for our Finest Bush Jr. If you're attached to that, if you have alerts set on your phone, you'll get a notification. We got Miss Cindy, Elder Cynthia Steele, Jeannie Smith. We got some more people coming on in, so we'll give a few more. So as always, we'll just take a moment just to encourage everybody to make sure that you're tuning in not only for those Bible study lessons, but also on Sundays at 10 a.m. We have service, and it airs on Facebook live as well as on YouTube live. So you can always go back and catch those recordings. Recordings of our Marriage Monday live events are also on the church Facebook page as well as on Facebook, YouTube as well. So share those. You just never know how much someone might need help in their marriage. People don't always voice that. Sometimes it's a private struggle for people. They just don't sometimes even know how to go about asking for help. So just share it. If someone is married, it's not an indication that you think their marriage is bad. It's just an indication that you care about them. So share that information. This video or even past videos, just as a show of love and support for their relationship.
Yeah, and two other things I want to mention that the bishop is also doing are two discussion classes that take place during the week. One is on Thursday evening. It's basically a Bible study discussion with some of the elders and members to talk about actually what we've learned throughout the week through his sermons. And then there's a master's class on Sunday. Comes on normally about 11:30 right after the sermon. And there's another discussion panel to kind of iron out or just get more in depth with a discussion about the sermons. And then you get more teaching from the bishops from our perspective about some of the things we may have questions about that he even talked about, just some clarity. So we have great Bible study classes, and then we have discussion panels to clarify questions that we may have. So those things you can get involved with on Facebook and just look and learn. Come and look and listen and learn.
And we want you guys to comment as well. Whenever there's a Facebook Live event or even a YouTube Live, we really do want those comments. It lets us know that you are being interactive and that what we're saying has impact on you. We want the discussion. We know it's a little bit, using social media is a little bit of a different format for a social discussion. But we rely on those comments to help us sort of gauge the audience, sort of gauge the relevance of what we're talking about. So just give us a little bit of feedback so that we know we're on the right track or that you're needing more. We appreciate all you single folks that are chiming in. We really I really do think there's a lot of value for single people in learning about marriage. If you desire marriage or even just desire a relationship, it is very valuable for you to find out from people who have had successful relationships what works, what doesn't work. Get some information and just increase your knowledge about it. That never hurts. In fact, it's very helpful for you moving forward to learn and gain information that you can apply in wisdom to your own life. So we're happy for these single folks coming on, as well as married.
So with that said, we would just like to get on into the discussion tonight, and we want to formally welcome you to Marriage Mondays with myself, Nick, and Trina Brinson. We are a product of Crown Kingdom Cultural Center, and we are here to give you some advice, some wisdom that we've been given, and some encouragement in your marriages. And we just want to thank our Bishop, Finest Bush Jr. and Lady Denise Bush for giving us this opportunity to bring this information to you. Always. So tonight, our discussion will center on intimacy. What is intimacy? How would you define intimacy? You know, just think about that in your own way. So how would you describe what intimacy is? By definition, it is a close familiarity with friendship, or talking about you and your spouse, or you and your significant other, you know, who you build a relationship with. That's intimacy, a closeness, a togetherness, a rapport, an attachment, being familiar with somebody else. So tonight we're going to discuss 5 topics or types of intimacy. And the first one we're going to talk about, you got something to say?
Well, there are more than 5. We're just choosing to discuss 5 tonight just for sake of time and just for the sake of giving you an amount of information that's digestible. There are many more, but 5 that we want to share with you tonight. Also, when you were talking about the definition of intimacy, I've heard in sermons and in even in our research in doing this, people use the term or break down the word intimacy as an into me see, and it really is relevant to that way, because it is sort of a short, catchy way of giving a good look at what intimacy is. You really are taking a look into someone. They're allowing you to. So it's an invitation for someone to allow. You cannot be intimate with someone. Hey, Nancy. It's my friend. I miss you. Haven't seen you in a while. But it is an opportunity for people to, you have to extend that opportunity to someone else. You cannot be intimate with someone who does not allow you to see that part of them, or to be intimate with them. That becomes a violation. And so intimacy requires that participation, that shared participation.
All right. The first one we're going to talk about tonight, which tends to have the most fun attached to it, is physical intimacy. And when people think about physical intimacy, at least for me, before doing a lot of this research, it was more or less like the sexual part of the relationship between me and my wife. But physical intimacy goes farther than just touching and feeling. So, you want to comment on that before I get? Now, when you're talking about physical intimacy, there are other things you can do to show your partner that you can be intimate with them without actually going through the process of having sex with them. Actually, sex comes as a byproduct of you being intimate with your partner on a daily basis in one form or another. And then that increases the pleasure of the sexual part of intimacy. So other things you can do when you're talking about being physically intimate with your partner, y'all can have couples workouts. Actually, me and my wife have been getting up early in the morning for the last 3 weeks and going on mile and a half walks with each other. That's a time of intimacy that we spend with each other. You looking at me like, You don't agree with that?
It's been a lot more than a mile and a half.
Oh, I thought she was disagreeing with me. But we've been walking a mile,
Your
mile and a
numbers are
half,
off.
2 miles, sometimes 3. But we've been doing that a lot more with each other. Other suggestions of physical intimacy is taking a dancing class with each other. Couples massages, meaning you can actually massage your partner and they can massage you. That's a type of physical intimacy. Those are things you can explore physically with each other to draw yourselves closer to each other.
I think a key component to it is that this is not a level of intimacy that you necessarily should share with someone else. It's an intimacy that's personal within your relationship. Of course, you can, do share physical activities with somebody. That's not the same thing as having a physically intimate relationship. There are some boundaries that you only cross with, or that you hold as sacred, or you hold only for your spouse. That's reserved for your spouse. Not everybody has that privilege, and so that's what makes it an intimate level. Just by the fact that it's not for everybody. That's something that's reserved specifically for you and your spouse as a way of honoring each other. So that's just one part of physical intimacy, and everybody's familiar with that. There's nothing new there. But one thing about it is the physical intimacy is much more enhanced when you have other levels of intimacy. Because the physical intimacy is not always a good thing if you're not on the same page. And so it's important for you to be connected intimately in other ways, even before getting to that point of physical intimacy. And so we'll talk about some of those other ways.
All right. Emotional intimacy. This one where you look into the person and you get their deepest, darkest concerns. I don't want to say fears because we don't teach fear, but you get their deepest, darkest concerns about things that have went on with them, things that they're trying to do. Do they trust you with that information? Right. And if they trust you with the information, y'all become emotionally intimate with each other. Some things that may actually make you look weaker, or just some things that are cause
vulnerable.
Make you look, that's a good word, vulnerable to the other person. But by doing this or participating in this intimacy, it actually draws you closer to the other person.
Yeah, it's important with emotional intimacy. It's one of those things that you cannot force. Your spouse does not owe you a look into their emotions. That's something that has to be mutually. It's got to be a safe for both of you, and it's that can be a point of contention in a relationship if you're not on the same page with being able to express your emotions to one another, not just about each other, but about life in general. To be able to talk about those things that may have happened to you as a child that you don't really care to talk about, but you need to. Knowing that your spouse is a safe place for you to have that conversation and to gain support. That is a level of emotional intimacy, and I just can't stress enough that that's not something that comes automatic. I'm your wife, you should be telling me these things, or I'm your husband, you should be sharing these things with me. It has to be earned. It has to be earned based on trust, based on knowing that your spouse is a safe place for you to have those conversations, for you to share, for you to unload. Of intimacy that some people may have with friends, but certainly inside of you, and not to say that you shouldn't have that. That's fine to have emotional intimacy with friends, but you certainly should have emotional intimacy with your spouse. And having that level of intimacy and trust requires that you're able to let your guard down, that you're able to come from behind those walls that you may have built up of insecurity or mistrust, afraid of being hurt. Your spouse has to be, in order to build emotional intimacy, your spouse has to present themselves as that, and you have to trust your spouse in order to be able to share on that level, to have that emotional intimacy.
And this is the one that has to be constantly worked on. Like my wife said, it's nothing that happens overnight. This is a developmental process of shared times and building up trust, because you just don't spill, you don't spill your heart out to somebody that you don't fully trust. So this has to be constantly worked on throughout your marriage, and arguably it's the most important one in your marriage relationship, because if I can build this relationship emotionally, that's a bond that even if something happens in the other ones, we're emotionally connected. And that's where a lot of people get in trouble with outside of the marriage. You get emotionally connected to somebody else.
Right.
That's a form of cheating without the physical, but you're betraying your marriage, because you form something, a great bond with a person that you're not married to. So you need to.
That interferes with your marriage. There's nothing wrong with having because I mean, sometimes you can talk to your parents and have that level of emotional intimacy with your parents or your sibling or relative or something. You can have emotional intimacy with other people. The problem comes in is when it interferes with your marriage relationship.
And that's where I was talking to a gentleman less than a week and a half ago, and he basically shared with me that he was in love with another woman, although he was still married, and their marriage has been on the rocks for years now. And what happened, emotionally attached to another woman. He even told me, he said, Coach, it wasn't even about the sex. He said she understood me and she accepted me for where I was in life, and she valued my dreams and my thoughts and my ideas. And he said, I basically fell in love with her right there. I said, well, you violated your marriage relationship when you did that. If you felt yourself going that way, you should have backed away and reassessed yourself before you went all in with that. So that's all I'm going to tell you about that. So,
well, it's important. It's important to have safeguards in place. That relationship went too far. Mm-hmm. Anytime, and we've talked about this before on here, anytime you have a friend, particularly of the opposite gender, that you are in relationship with and your spouse is not also in relationship with, that's not a good road to go down. That's a danger. That's a threat to your marriage. And it's not for your spouse to point that out. That's for you to protect your own marriage by recognizing that relationships with people of the opposite gender, they have to have boundaries on them. And you cannot allow that relationship to get between your spousal relationship. You have to have some safeguards in place. And if you have a friend of the opposite gender that's not a friend of your spouse, then you have a problem. That's what you have.
Mm-hmm. So that was emotional intimacy. The next one we're going to talk about is intellectual intimacy. Being able to talk on a level that both of y'all understand and have the same competency with each other, that allows you to build on your understanding of each other.
I hope you got some more to say about it.
Well, I studied, and that's basically what I got from it.
Well, I think for intellectual intimacy, it's being able to put your minds together and to really explore what your hopes and aspirations are, what you understand something to be. Even to, reading the same material or watching something and then talking about it, analyzing it together, or sharing varying views or even agreeing points of view, but being able to have an intellectual conversation where you are free to express your ideas, free to share with your spouse, always being respectful. That should go without saying, but I'm gonna say it. Always being respectful of your spouse's ideas and thoughts, and encouraging that intellectual growth, and just knowing what's in the other person's mind and how they think, and also sharing that as well. Just being able to let your guard down and to not be afraid of judgment for what you think. That leads to that level of intimacy intellectually. We've said it before. We have over the years several times shared books. Like we would read books separately, and then come together and talk about it. That's a level of intellectual intimacy. You know, I'm listening to how you respond to what you read, and the same for me. And some people, you know, don't have that interest, and that's fine. But that's just an example of how you can develop that type of intimacy, the intellectual intimacy, and even your career goals and aspirations. Just being able to share that freely. Some people are afraid to share what their true goals and aspirations are for fear of being ridiculed or for fear of failure. You know, if I tell you what I want to do and you think it's stupid, you know, then that's gonna be damaging to me, as opposed to you as my spouse. I know that if I tell you something and it sounds outlandish, you at least will respect the fact that that is how I feel about it. Mm-hmm. And so just having that safe place, once again, that's where it gets down to the point of intimacy, having a safe place to where you can have those conversations.
And I think the first book that we ever read together was Purpose Driven Life.
Yeah.
And that brought us together about 40 lessons in that book.
Something like that.
And, you know, we basically went through 40 days of coming together and talking about whatever that next chapter was. And, you know, unknowing that it actually brought us closer together by reading that book. And a lot of the lessons in that book, I think we instilled in our kids and daily walk that we are sharing right now and benefiting from right now.
Yeah, it put us on the same, it helped us to clarify how we were on the same page. So it was a gift. I mean, it's not like we had this great idea to, hey, let's do this. It was a gift that was given to each of us. And so we just decided to do it together, and it really did. And one of the key points I want to point out, and for us, reading the books is what encouraged this, is having conversation. And so a lot of times people may live together, and especially if both people work outside of the home, you know, in the mornings it's a rush, mad dash to get out of the door. So you may exchange a few words in the morning, but certainly not quality conversation in most cases. And then when you get home in the afternoon, you're tired, you're exhausted, the man might be out of words, and you know, there's kids to feed and bathe and homework and all that kind of stuff. And so very often the quality of conversation is not good at the end of the day as well, especially when we get on our devices or in front of the TV in separate rooms. There's no communication, and you cannot build intimacy without physically being together in the same place, or at least even if it's across, you know, long distance, if you're on the phone together, but you have to be together, and you have to be having conversation to have something in order to build these types of intimacy that we're talking about. And so like I say, for us, during those times, sometimes when we were kind of at that point of just not really truly talking, the books kind of gave us an opportunity to have to come together and talk.
Started conversations is what it did. Mm-hmm. And it made us actually start talking to each other. And like she explained it very well, you come home and you're tired. After you separate your baby duties and do what needs to be done for the night, your time is short, and then you want to try to retrieve some of that time for yourself when you should be giving it to your spouse. You just take it for yourself, and that draws a wedge between you and your spouse. So books or conversation starters can always be a means to have conversation with the other person, and that definitely intellectual intimacy.
Yeah, if that's what you're into. For some people, it could be cooking together. It doesn't have to be books. I mean, even physically cooking a meal together, or being in the same space. If that's a way for you to bond, then use that. Planning out. Planning is always a good idea in my book. But even planning out how you're going to go about the rest of your week, knowing that you have to have that time to on that, even if it's over a calendar or planner or whatever. Those you can build into your life opportunities where you have to communicate, and it builds that spirit of being on the same team, and it puts some safeguards in place to make sure that you are having to communicate with one another and to build. It's easier in some stages of life than in others. If you have raised your kids and they're out, issue. If you hadn't had kids yet and they're young, or if you only have one, you might not have that issue. But when you start having multiple children and people having jobs, both of you have jobs, or one staying home and have that job to do, it can get very challenging to make sure that you are doing what it takes to maintain a healthy relationship. So putting some safeguards in place is critical in order to guard that intimacy, or you'll find that it's not there.
Right.
It doesn't happen automatically when life gets to be so full. I mean, it's kind of easy when you're young and or early in the relationship, not necessarily young, but early in the relationship when you're still running on those pheromones, I guess, or or still high on love and everything. But after a while, when things settle down, you have to put some effort into it.
All right, the fourth one we're going to talk about is experiential intimacy. Let me say that word again, experiential intimacy. I was trying well to say that word tonight.
Good job.
So with this one, you just listen to the root word. It's about experiences together. Your experiences, how well you do things together. Whether you like to travel, whether you like to build things, you want to start a garden, you want to raising your kids on the same, in agreement with how you raise your kids. Things that you do together, you get experiences, and it causes you to have that intimacy with each other. I can remember the one of the first things that caused me to be closer to my wife. It happened when her brother-in-law had passed, and I was there for her, as long as she needed me to, because you shared that you hadn't really been through anything like that before,
Oh, no.
and we basically, that was one of the points in our relationship that cemented me and her being together. And then when my mom got sick and passed away, that right there was another moment in time. I don't want to relate it all to death, but that was another moment in time that showed me, oh, she there for me regardless of, whatever. She gonna be there for me, and that right there drew me closer to her. And through all of that, other things that we've shared together, other experiences, we love to travel. Mm-hmm. We find out we got the same appetite for travel. When we go somewhere, we like to experience where we've been, so we can, and it also keeps conversation going. We still talk about our New York trip to this day, and it brings back good feelings when we talk about it. So when you're going through life experiences, that draws you closer together.
Yeah, experience. When you were talking about, even though those were negative things, but I mean, negative things happen in life like that, or sad experiences, crisis. People get sick. Mm-hmm. Sometimes an illness, or something tragic that might happen could be the very thing that draws you closer together. Sometimes there's good that comes out of those negative experiences. Of course, to travel, having children, and the experiences you build, during that process as well, as of raising children, and the highs and the lows of that. Even I heard someone speak recently that they realized that they couldn't have children at all, but that tragedy actually brought them closer together and got them on the same page for them to then start to focus on, well, what are we going to do? Do we want to adopt? Are we going to mentor other kids? Are we going to help other people raise their kids? And that experience brought them together and brought some focus in. And that's a very intimate thing to go through, having kids or even not having kids. Just the highs and lows connected with that. It affects your relationship, and how it affects your relationship depends on your perspective and how you go through it. Just realize that whatever you're going through together. Right. And so that level of intimacy, it certainly brings you closer together. Like I said, whether it's having the kids or not having kids, either way, let it be something that makes you stronger, not something to tear you apart. You have each other, go through it together.
Right. That's good. All right. The last one we're going to talk about tonight is probably the most important. I think it's definitely the most important one for us is spiritual intimacy. That right there in itself is the glue that holds your marriage together.
At least ours.
And when we've never waved from that. We understood that since the beginning, I think. And, you know, as we've gotten older, we see that the importance of having that spiritual connection with God. You know, even though we built our spiritual lifestyles differently as we've grown from childhood to now. But since we've been married, we've been blessed to hear the same information while we've been married to build on the information that we've gotten. Because early on in my life, you know, I was not a church-going kid, and I didn't, you know, go to church often. You know, I went sometimes. But, you know, my wife was raised in the church and going to church, I would venture to say almost every Sunday, often. You know, you can tell your own story, but she was a church-going person along with her family. So as I grew, I saw the need to have God in my life in order for me to be able to be the head of this house like I needed to be. And with that spiritual connection to Him, allowed me to be spiritually connected to her, and we've been able to grow together spiritually. Yeah,
I think that's always been a foundational, that's always been at the core of our relationship, is individual spiritual growth and then making an effort to have spiritual growth together. And so we've always worshiped together by choice. That was something that was important to, even as we were dating. That was something that was important to us, was for us to worship together, to learn together. I mean, we've always done Bible study in church, and have been able to talk about it. So that's spiritual, and of course it is an individual journey. It's an individual commitment. But my spiritual health is important to him, just like his spiritual health is important to me. And it gives me a level of reassurance if I see that he has his own relationship with God and he's working on his relationship with God, and I see that he's praying for us, family, and that he's making godly choices. That has always given me a level of peace that I could count on, and it's that commitment, my personal commitment to God, that has made me have to refocus, or even if I'm out of acting in a way that's not of faith, or acting out of my my soul instead of my spirit. That relationship with God, and also seeing his relationship with God, always reminds me to go back to Christ, to always go back to the Spirit, go back to the Word in order to decide how to handle this next situation. So that has been that's been fundamental for both of us.
Yep.
And in how we choose to, it has guided how we run our finances, how we raise our children. So I think you're right. The spiritual intimacy has been probably the most important. And we share what we feel like God is talking to each of us about. We talk about the lessons that we're learning in church. We talk about it with each other and also with our children. And that's just been a fundamental piece for us. And it has absolutely been the glue that has been able to hold us together. So even through those, even when all those other areas were messed up, those other types of intimacy, when they weren't strong, we could always go back to that level of spiritual intimacy. We can always pull each other back by going back to the Word. That's always been the goal.
So that's the one I think if you focus on, I ain't got to think about it, is one that you should focus on in order to keep your relationship where it needs to be. We just, like my wife said, we always been the couple that, you know, if something is not happening here in agreement, we always go back to the Word and we get agreement through the Word.
Yeah, accountability. And if you have a spouse, sometimes you have different levels of spiritual growth within the marriage. You may not both be on the same level, I guess you can say, spiritually. But the key thing is to pray for one another. That's something you can always do, because spiritual growth it's not like your natural developmental growth. Your spiritual growth is based upon your faith. It's based upon how much you're putting into it to grow. And so that's something that can always be increased. Pray for one another. Show you how to deal with your spouse. God always knows more about your spouse than you do. That's what I always say. Well, God, you made him. Show me how to say it, when to say it, what to say to get through. Because if I do it the way I want to do it, it's not going to be pretty.
Right.
So just invite God in that situation.
And I'll just put this out here too. I know some people may get married and still go to different churches and all that. But let me submit this to you. Getting some of the same information helps with your ideals and when you're dealing in your relationship. If you're going to two different churches, even two different denominations, some of the information is a little skewed between the denominations. Definitely. You got to get on the same page, possibly get in the same church. And if you're not in the same church, like my wife say, talk about what y'all just heard at church and come to some resolution. Believe in your marriage relationship and let the Bible be the final say. Yeah. Best advice I can give you.
Yeah. You can still be intimate. That level of intimacy is even more important.
Yep, learn to agree. And learn how to have peace in your household. Agreement and peace are two good things. Great.
Yeah, it's necessary.
Well, that was our 5 tonight, dealing with intimacy. Hopefully you got something out of this lesson tonight, and prayerfully God to put something in your heart to allow you to go back and listen to the broadcast tonight, or just something that you got tonight. Do a little bit more research on it to help you in your marriage. Those are my final thoughts. You got anything?
No, I don't. I think we said plenty. So I just hope it's helpful to you.
We just want to thank you for tuning in tonight. From the lady and the coach, we love y'all. Good night.